In the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, when the world falls silent and shadows stretch like talons across empty streets, there exists a doorway. It is not marked on any map, nor does it follow the rules of time or space. This doorway, whispered about in obscure forums and urban legends, is said to open only once every decade. Those who step through are never seen again, but they leave behind something far worse. It began with a message on an encrypted chat server frequented by conspiracy theorists, paranormal investigators, and the outcasts. The post was from a user called Observer9. Do you want to see what lies beyond? Meet me at 34th and Ash at 3:03 a.m. Bring nothing but yourself. If you're late, don't bother. The message disappeared seconds after being posted, but not before a few curious users had screenshotted it. One of them was Marcus, a disillusioned tech worker whose life had been spiraling since the death of his sister. Haunted by guilt and desperate for meaning, Marcus decided to investigate. When Marcus arrived at the desolate intersection, 4 others stood waiting. Elena, a former journalist chasing her next big story. Samir, a college dropout obsessed with cryptids. Riley, a silent figure cloaked in a hood, their face unreadable. Olivia, an artist who claimed to have seen the doorway in her dreams. At precisely 3:03 a.m., a low hum vibrated through the air. The streetlights flickered and died. A jagged crack appeared in the pavement, stretching and widening until it became a gaping black void. From within, faint whispers echoed, words in no known language, yet they stirred something primal and fearful in all who heard them. "Step through," a voice commanded. It wasn't Observer 9, it wasn't human. The group hesitated, but one by one they entered. The moment Marcus stepped through, his breath was stolen by the sight before him. They were no longer in their world. The sky was a deep, swirling red, and massive black spires jutted from the ground like the bones of a forgotten god. The air was heavy with the metallic scent of blood, and the ground pulsed beneath their feet as if alive. "Welcome," a figure emerged, a tall, emaciated being with hollow eyes that seemed to consume light. "You have been chosen to bear witness to the abyss between worlds. But beware, for knowledge comes at a price." The group was separated, each forced to confront a deeply personal nightmare. Elena found herself in a newsroom, but the headlines revealed the horrific future her reporting had inadvertently caused: wars, pandemics, collapses. Samir faced the cryptids he'd spent his life chasing, but they were far more real and far more dangerous than he ever imagined. Riley was confronted by the truth of their identity, a revelation so earth-shattering it threatened to unravel their mind. Olivia stood in an endless gallery of her own artwork, each piece depicting her death in increasingly gruesome detail. Marcus faced his sister, alive but transformed. Her body twisted, her eyes empty, her voice a distorted echo. "Why didn't you save me?" Those who survived the tests reunited, scarred and broken. The figure revealed its true form, an entity that existed across dimensions, feeding on the fear, pain, and despair of those who entered its realm. "This is the hive," it said, "and you are now a part of it." The survivors were marked with sigils on their flesh, branding them as conduits. Through them, the hive's influence would seep into their world, spreading its reach. Desperate to escape, Marcus led the group in a rebellion. They fought their way through the labyrinthine spires, using fragments of their newfound knowledge to manipulate the environment. When they finally found a portal, they stepped through, only to find themselves back at 34th and Ash. But something was wrong. The city was silent. No people, no animals. Only a deafening hum that grew louder with every passing second. Above them, the sky split open, revealing countless eyes staring down. The hive had followed them. Weeks later, reports of strange phenomena began surfacing worldwide. People vanishing, buildings decaying overnight, and whispers in the dark that drove listeners mad. Marcus, now a hollow shell of his former self, stared at the sigil on his hand. It pulsed like a second heartbeat, a constant reminder that they hadn't escaped. They had brought the hive home. The city Marcus and the others returned to was no longer their own. It looked the same at first glance. Skyscrapers reaching toward the heavens, streetlights flickering along deserted avenues. But the deeper they ventured, the more the cracks in reality became evident. Shadows moved independently of their sources, slithering like living creatures. Windows reflected places that didn't exist, and whispers followed them, echoing their fears and regrets in distorted voices. Elena, still clutching her camera, began recording everything. "If we don't survive this," she said, her voice trembling, "someone has to know." The group followed the only light they could see, a faint glow emanating from the city center. As they walked, their surroundings morphed. Streets twisted into impossible angles, defying geometry. Time itself seemed unstable. One moment the sun blazed overhead, and the next they were plunged into the cold darkness of night. It was Olivia who first noticed the marks on their bodies changing. What began as faint sigils now pulsed with a dark energy, glowing softly whenever they approached areas of distortion. "I think these marks are keys," she whispered. Keys indeed. The marks allowed them to pass through certain barriers within the city, walls that were not walls, doors that were not doors. But with each use, the marks grew hotter, searing their flesh and sapping their strength. "We can't keep doing this," Samir said, clutching his arm where the sigil burned brightest. "It's killing us." Marcus refused to stop. "If this thing is using us, then it's because we're the only ones who can stop it." As they delved deeper into the city, they encountered others, people who had been marked like them but had succumbed to the hive's influence. These silent ones moved in jerky, unnatural motions, their eyes blackened voids. They didn't speak, but emitted a low hum that resonated in the bones of anyone who came too close. The group quickly learned that the silent ones could sense the energy of their marks. Each encounter became a deadly game of cat and mouse, with Marcus leading the group through twisting alleyways and shadowy corridors to evade their hunters. The strain of survival began to fracture the group. Samar accused Marcus of leading them in circles, while Elena argued that their efforts were futile without a clear goal. "Do you even know what we're looking for?" she demanded. Marcus didn't answer. He had no idea what the light in the city center was or why they were drawn to it, but he felt its pull deep in his soul, as though it were the only thing anchoring him to reality. Riley, who had remained silent for most of their journey, finally spoke. "The light isn't salvation," they said. "It's a lure, a trap." When they finally reached the light, it was nothing like they expected. It emanated from a massive spire that seemed to pierce the heavens. The structure was made of a shimmering, translucent material that pulsed with an eerie glow. Inside, the air was thick and suffocating. The walls seemed to ripple, as though alive. At the center of the spire stood a figure cloaked in shadow. It radiated an overwhelming sense of power and malice. "You've come so far," the figure said, its voice echoing with countless tones. "But you were never meant to leave. You were meant to bring me here." The group's marks flared brightly, their pain unbearable. Marcus fell to his knees as the entity reached out a hand, pulling strands of light from their bodies. The entity revealed the truth. The hive was not merely a creature but a collective consciousness from a dimension beyond human comprehension. The marks were not keys. They were anchors, tethering the hive to their reality. "You are my bridge," the entity said. "Through you, I will consume your world." But Olivia noticed something. The marks on their bodies pulsed in rhythm with the spire. She realized that the marks not only connected them to the hive, but also gave them a sliver of control. Olivia proposed a desperate plan. If they could overload the marks with energy, they might sever the hive's connection to their world, but it would come at a cost. "I'll do it," Marcus said, his voice firm. "This is my fault. I brought us here. Let me end it." The group argued, but in the end, they knew Marcus was right. Using the marks, Marcus drew all the energy from the spire into himself. The pain was excruciating, but he held on, channeling it back into the entity. The spire began to collapse, and the entity screamed in rage as its connection to their world was severed. When the group awoke, they were back at 34th and Ash. The marks on their bodies were gone, and the city was restored to its normal state. But Marcus was missing. In the weeks that followed, strange phenomena began to occur again. Glimpses of the silent ones in dark alleys, whispers in the night, and fleeting shadows that didn't belong. The hive was not gone, and somewhere, in a dimension beyond human comprehension, Marcus stood alone in the darkness, his body glowing with the marks of the hive. "I'll keep fighting," he whispered, "as long as it takes."